Okay, so hello everyone. Good evening, good afternoon to all of you. As our today's topic of discussion is fire and arson. Hope my screen is visible to you all.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay. So, as per the name suggests, for the today's topic of discussion of this webinar is fire and arson investigation. When we say the term fire, so something like this sort of image came to our mind, like everything is on flame. Only we can able to see the flames which are coming, and if along with that flame, we can only see the burnt remains, the ashes. So let's study what is fire and what's the difference between the two, fire and arson. Uh, can you help me please for changing the next slide? Just a second, I'll share it again. Just a second. It is. Okay. Is it visible?
Yeah, it's visible. It's visible.
Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. Actually, I was trying that I can share the window, but I won't get the option for that. So I'm sharing from the Google
Okay.
screen view option.
All right then. That's fine.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So our today's topic of discussion is fire and arson. When we say fire, fire means some sort of flame, the things which are kept on the flame or different objects which are under the contact of some flammable material, they catches fire because of some of the reason. So any object can be put on fire, but how this chemistry is attained, we have to study, we have to discuss it in this session. So we'll be covering what is fire, what are the basic components of fire, then the chemistry of fire, how fire has taken place, then some common terms which are associated with fire, what are the different types of fire, then we'll study about the difference of fire and arson, because these two are different terms depending on to the criminal aspect. So we'll study what is arson, what are the reasons that person commit arson, then what all evidence which we get at the scene of crime in any fire or arson case, how can we do the searching, collection of evidence, preservation of evidence, then different patterns of fire, because these patterns also indicate us and provide us useful evidence for the investigation of the case and how the fire has proceeded, and followed by that the forensic analysis of fire. So starting with fire, when I use the term fire, that means the objects, they are being reacting with the oxygen and some fuel which are there in the vicinity of those objects. So fire is what? A simple chemical reaction in which the object is combined with the oxygen and the fuel. And those flames which we can see while the during the reaction of fire, these are the heat and light. Means the energy is being released in the form of heat and light. So we can also say like that fire is a rapid oxidation process with the evolution of heat and light at different intensities. And when we say oxidation means when any substance tries to combine with oxygen, then the process is known as oxidation. So this oxidation process is being occurring whenever any object is catching fire. There is a so this fire, they always start with small, but they keep on growing until or unless by the availability of the oxygen. So fire is what these like large flames, plumes, smoke, exothermic reaction. As I've already said that during the fire, the heat is released, the smoke is released, light intensity is very high. So it is considered to be an exothermic reaction, which is a self-sustaining chemical reaction that may involve a solid, liquid, or gas phase fuel and the oxidation of the substance in the presence of atmospheric oxygen. So the fire accomplished by three components. We require the major components, like for anything to be fulfilled or to be completed, we require some basic things which are necessary for that process to complete. In the similar way, fire is the phenomena which is getting completed if we have the three factors, the three main components, which are the first one is the fuel, second is the heat, and third is the oxygen or the oxidizing agent. So whenever this triangle is being accomplished, means we have an object, okay, along with us, then we have oxygen, and which when they two combine, the heat is being released, means that process will catch fire, or that object will catch fire. So the presence of the fuel, oxygen, along with an appropriate ignition source, the object which is catching the fire, it must be liable to catch fire. It must be any flammable substance or any sort of ignition source is there which is causing that substance to catch fire. Then that fuel, what that fuel is doing, the fuel is exaggerating that fire, that flame, so that the substance is reaching to the ignition temperature and it will easily spread the fire. Then the oxygen, which is again a necessity for the fire to accomplish. So the fuel, the heat, and the oxygen, these are considered to be the three main components. And if this fire triangle is completed, or we can say the fire tetrahedron is completed by the chemical reaction between these three, then automatically in the phenomena results in fire. So firstly, we'll discuss about fuel. For the first component of fire is fuel. So any material, usually of organic nature, that contains hydrogen and carbon. Why? Because these hydrogen, carbon, and the organic compounds, they have the tendency that they can easily be oxidized by the oxygen present in the atmosphere or in this suitable ignition source, in the presence of suitable ignition source. So the fuel can be anything. We can have solids as a fuel, like solid cannot burn in their original state. They firstly has to convert it into a gaseous form by the process of pyrolysis. When we heat the solid material at a very high temperature, like if we have to heat up and we want wood or any wooden furniture, any table, any chair, or any other thing to be as a fuel. So we can use that substance in the form of a fuel only when we heat it up to a very high temperature by the process of pyrolysis. So solids can act as a fuel in that way. Then we have the second substance as a fuel are liquids. The common volatiles or the common accelerants which we generally came across, they are examples of fuel only, liquid fuels like our gasoline, our kerosene, diesel, then our alcohols, acetone, thinners, ethanol, and many other substances which are generally of volatile nature. So these substances, because their boiling point is quite low, they can easily get vaporized. They give off flammable vapors in the gaseous phase by vaporization process. Then the third, the fuel substance are gases. The gases or the gaseous fuel, it is released from the material, means when the solid is being heated up to a very high temperature, and when these liquids, they give off vapors. So both of these, they make gases as an important fuel, which mixes with the atmospheric oxygen and undergo the process of combustion. So this is a simple web chart that is showing that solids on pyrolysis and very high heating at very high temperature, they convert into gas. Similarly, solids can be converted to gases by another process called as sublimation. And when gases, we have to convert them back into solids, then the process is called deposition. Similarly, liquids, they can be converted to gases by boiling and vice versa by condensation. Then the second component of fire is oxygen or the oxidizing agent. Like I have told you, the three main components of fire, the fire triangle, one is fuel, second is oxygen or oxidizing agent, and the third one is the heat source. So the second is oxidizing agent, which can be any substance that can make available the oxygen to the substance. So it is considered as one of the significant factor which influences the development of fire, because any substance will catch fire only and only if there is oxygen present in the vicinity, in the surroundings. You people have heard of, like in our school days, we used to perform the experiment that we used to light the candle. Okay, the candle starts burning, it catch fire, the wick of the candle catches fire. Why? When we kept it in the open area, because in the open area oxygen is there. But if we try to cover that candle flame with some sort of like container or some sort of box, okay, so what we are doing, we are cutting off the oxygen supply. So we are stopping the supply of oxygen. That's why the candle extinguishes. Okay, so in the same way, the objects, they are catching the fire, they are liable to catch fire only and only if oxygen is there, oxygen is present, otherwise not. No oxygen supply, then it can be one of the factor that leads to extinguishing of fire. Then third one is the heat source. Heat is released in terms of energy, as we all know, because it's only the energy transformation. So when there's fuel, oxygen, they try to combine together, they release heat. So it can be electrical, like as any heat which is produced by some sort of electrical spark, any electric arc, or some spark between the two conductors. Then mechanical heat can one of the form, like heat generated by the friction of a stone on metal, or by the use of some lighter, by the use of some matchbox or matchstick. Then chemical heat, which is generated when suppose sodium metal is mixed with water. Then also a reaction accomplished, a reaction will take place instantaneously, that is releasing the heat sources there. Then biological heat can be any biological activity in the haystcock, or nuclear heat source can be with the any kind of missile material, nuclear fission, fusion, nuclear reactors, like that. So when this tetrahedron is completed, means the fuel, heat and oxygen, they react together by a chemical reaction, then this fire tetrahedron is accomplished, okay, and fire will take place. Moving on to the chemistry of fire, as we all know, fire is what basically a phenomena of heat. Fire is releasing what? Fire is releasing heat, or fire is being accomplished by heat, oxygen, heat and fuel. So the chemistry of fire depends on the heat transfer mechanism. Heat transfer mechanism are of three types. The first one is the conduction, then convection and radiation. Conduction is what? The transfer of the heat between the solids, means from one end, any object which is being placed on a flame or which is in direct contact with the flame. So first thing, or the first end which is coming in direct contact with the flame, it is getting heated up first, and later that heat is being transferred gradually, or we can say sequentially, from one molecule to another molecule of that material, so that the heat is getting transferred from the hotter end of an object to the colder end of an object, like the transfer of heat in a solid material. Suppose if I am considering any sort of frying pan or any sort of like any wooden furniture. So at one end of the furniture, the flame is there. So that end is in direct contact with the flame. So that end heated up, and after few minutes or after like a particular time duration, we can see that that heated end, that hotter end, it is transferring the heat from one molecule to another molecule, and later on what we can see and observe is the another end of that furniture is also heated up, because the heat is being transferred by the process of conduction. So whenever fire has taken place, if suppose objects are placed in closed vicinity, or one after the other, so if one object catches fire, and we have placed one wooden substance followed by any material made of paper, followed by some clothings, like that. So we have placed them sequentially, one after the other, so that if one catches the fire, by the process of conduction, the other substances, the other objects, other material also, they will catch fire, because the fire is being transferred from the hotter surface to the colder surface by the interaction of the vibrating atoms from particle to particle. So if a solid conductor is, if a solid substance is conducting the heat, and that is a good conductor, then automatically the rest of the object, rest of the materials which are being placed, they get heated up, and they also start burning. Second phenomenon of heat transfer is convection. Convection is what? Convection is the mode of heat transfer which is occurring with the fluids, with the liquids and gases. So what happens is, if suppose in a room or in general, suppose we have a, what is convection in general? First, I'm explaining that. Convection is you have kept a container containing the water. You have kept it on flame for boiling. So what you can see is when you kept that water onto the flame, the lower layer of that liquid, that water, it starts forming vapors. We can able to see the vapors are coming upwards. Small vapors are formed and they are coming upwards. Why? Because the lower layer, it will in direct contact with the flame. So they are getting heated up. The lower layer molecules, they are heated up. Then after heated up, they move upwards, they came across, they form vapors. Okay, those water bubbles which are now in the process of forming vapors, they move up. Okay, and from the side of the container, the bubbles, they move down, or that liquid water, the cooler water, it moves down for the same process to be repeated. So this is called convection, which occurs in the fluids, in the liquids and gases. So how this phenomena is utilized in the fire? In case of fire is, like if a room is there, an enclosed room is there in a typical room fire, convection is the phenomena that creates the hot layer of gases, because solids are being heated by the process of conduction. Then from the solids, we have these hot layers of gases which are being released. Okay, these gases, they are released, they come in contact with other solid material which are cooler, because it's not all at the same time, all the objects, all the things which are present in a room which is under fire, they start burning at the same time. No, some will burn instantaneously, some will take time to get heated up, some will burn at the end, some will remain as it is because they are the poor conductor of heat. So all these things depend onto the conditions, onto the material, their nature. So in convection, in a room fire, when these solid objects, they are heating up, they are releasing some hot layer of gases. So what happens? These hot layer of gases, which are being transferred, the heat, and spread that fire to the areas, to the places which are cooler. Suppose at the base, origin is at the center of the floor. So from that center of the floor, the flames are starting coming off. These flames are creating the hot layer of gases, and these hot layer of gases are now moving upwards towards the ceiling of the compartment, to make that cooler portion hotter. This is called convection. The third phenomena is radiation, by which the heat transfer takes place. This occurs with the help of some electromagnetic waves, because this is the medium, or this is the phenomena, rather I should say, that does not require any solid, liquid or gas for the heat waves to pass through. The main difference is that it does not require any matter in order to take place. Heat can be transferred in all the directions at the same time. Suppose in a typical room fire, the radiant heat, because the objects are heating up, the ceiling is heating up, the doors are heating up, so the overall environment of that room, it is very high, the temperature is very high. So the radiant heat increases the temperature of the all objects onto the floor, inside the room, and therefore the entire room is start burning. So the body of the hot gases at the ceiling, created through convection, when they reaches a maximum temperature which is high enough, then the radiation process will take place. They radiate all that heat downwards. Okay, and when that heat waves, they come downwards, that heat is, because heat is having the property that heat is always being transferred from the hotter area to a colder area. So when that ceiling portion is heated up completely, then these heat waves, they move down and they then increase the temperature of those solid material, those objects which have not started burning yet. So what happens? Other objects, they also reaches to a very high temperature. They also reaches to their auto ignition temperature, and as the fire will continue, the radiative heat becomes dominant as the heat transfer mechanism, and the entire room, entire floor, entire area will start burning. You can more clearly understand with this diagram. Like from here we have a fuel started. Okay, the fuel is there, the flame is there. What happens is, initially the flame is moving like this in a proper particular manner. It is heating up. The fire plume structure is this. It is properly heating up and move in an upward direction. So we can locate the flame zone. This is the ceiling. Then when this flame, it will now, initially the fire is at the growing stage, incipient stage, then it spreads further. Okay, then what happens, because of the spreading of the fire, the area or the objects which are near the flame, they are heating up. Okay, when they are heating up, hot airs are released. Then hot air release, what it is doing, it is then, and this hot air is moving upwards. So fire becomes established, plume reaches ceiling, and ceiling jet begins to form. Means a jet area, a blackening of the ceiling can be seen because these hot air, they move upwards. Then what happens from here? Because the fire is in the center, so the center area is heating up. At present, the center area is heating up, but this portion is cooler. So from here, the cool air is moved here because hot air is moving upwards towards the ceiling. Then from the nearby area, which is cool, as the heat is transferred from the hotter to cooler object. So initially, this is cool. So heating started, hotter air is moving towards the cooler object. From this portion, this is cool. Cooler air came here. Okay, it starts it heating up and then it moves further upwards. So this process continue. Now you can see is, because the fire continue to spread, then the ceiling jet area becomes quite broader. There is a smoke filling at this area. Once the ceiling jet reaches the walls, then this jet is moving down because those hot waves, after the convection process, then they start radiating the heat waves. So they move down towards the wall, smoke layer bangs down, filling the upper portion of the room and forming a hot gas layer. So you can see the entire room is then getting filled up with the smoke, with the hot layer of gases. So this is the heat transfer mechanism. The temperature reaches to 1100 to 1200 degrees Celsius. Then what happens? The fuel, the flame, it will spread. Okay, the objects which are there, because of that convection, conduction, and radiation simultaneously, all the three processes are occurring. Then what happens? This heated area, this entrainment zone, it becomes bigger and bigger. Radiant heat from the smoke, it raises. Then all the flammable material, their temperature also increases. They reach their auto ignition temperature, means they can now attain self-sustained burning. They have reached to that temperature that they can start burn. They ignite. So the burning will start and the entire area will catch fire. Another image where you can see here is the flame is there. Okay, then heat waves are being released, which are causing the convection. When in the sides, if suppose the wall is getting heated up, so inside the wall, because the bricks, the material is being arranged in a continuous manner, so this is in the direct contact. If heat started from here, so in this manner, like in a row, it is heated up, then the area below it, then the area above it, like this. And when these two processes are occurring, then the entire area, the entire environment is getting hotter and hotter. So radiate heat will start coming out and the entire building, the entire place is heated up and fire will take place. Hope it's clear, the chemistry of fire. Then we have certain source of ignition. What can be the possible source of ignition for the fire to take place? Any sort of soot, any sort of chimney or stove. The sparks from the overheating of the building, any sort of material, any sort of garbage or vegetable heaps, which or any rubbish which is being kept in the open, any sort of thing which is in the incinerator, some sort of candle, some sort of burner, then cooker, some action of the smoldering, some heater, lamp, any other electrical appliance can be responsible and become a source of ignition. Now, moving on to certain terms which are related with the fire when we used to study this topic fire. So, we must came across certain terms. The first one is the combustion. Combustion is what? Combustion is simply the chemical union between the oxygen and the fuel. Whenever any fuel, now the fuel can be any solid substance, liquid substance, and any gaseous substance. So whenever there is a chemical union between the fuel with the oxygen at a very rapid rate, which leads to liberation of heat and light energy. So that process is known as combustion. Combustion cannot take place until and unless a substance has reached its ignition temperature. Ignition temperature is what? It is the minimum temperature to which the substance must be heated. Means if we want that substance to start giving off vapors or to start show burning, so it has to reach first a particular temperature, a minimum temperature, so that it can independently ignite or burn after removing the heating source from that. So firstly, we have to use some heating source, some source of ignition, kind of a matchstick, some sort of burner. Okay, we keep that heating source in close contact uh, with our substance which we want to ignite. So we have to keep that source of ignition closer to it, in close vicinity. What happens then? That substance, it will reach to a minimum temperature which is required for burning. So that temperature is known as auto ignition temperature. When the substance reaches that temperature, then if we remove the source of ignition, if we remove that matchstick, lighter, or any other thing, okay, any other thing, if we remove, then that substance will not blown off, or it will not extinguish. It will keep on burning because the substance has reached to the ignition temperature. Then another is flash point. It is the lowest temperature at which a substance give off vapors that will flash or burn momentarily when ignited. Means we have the two terms. One is ignition temperature or auto ignition temperature, which is specific for any material to material. It is not, we can say, it is same for all the materials. For wood, it is different. For any petrol, it is different. For kerosene, it is different. For paper, it is different. So different materials have different ignition temperature. Then we have flash point. So flash point is also the lowest temperature at which the substance will give off vapors that will flash or burn for a moment. Means this flash point is quite low. It is significantly and slightly low than the ignition temperature. Flash point, any substance will attain its flash point when we try to ignite that substance with the help of the ignition source. So at a particular moment when it catches that, it starts igniting or it catches the flame very in a very slight manner. At that point, we can say the substance has reaches its flash point because it is showing some flashes of light. But that is for the momentarily purpose. These are for the moment only. So the flash point of a material is the lowest temperature at which the ignition can occur, and if the suitable ignition source is removed, then the ignition will not take place. Then we have accelerant, which is usually the ignitable liquid used to initiate the fire or increase the growth of fire. So mostly the accelerants are liquid and they are petroleum based liquids. They are usually gasoline, mixture of gasoline with other organic substances, charcoal, lighter fluids, etc. Then we have point of origin. Point of origin is the important term, a key word for this fire and arson investigation because it is the location, it is the place from where the fire has started. Or we can simply say that it is the place, it is the location where the heat source, the fuel, they come in contact together, they come in contact with each other, and the fire begins. So when we have to search this scene of fire, okay, when we have to look out for the burnt remains, then we plausibly look for this point of origin, because this will give us the indication what type of, what nature of fire is, from where the fire has started, what is the cause of the fire, any accelerant is used, or it is some natural fire or any accidental fire. So we always have to look for the point of origin. Then combustible materials are what? Some examples include the flaming combustion of solid, liquids, okay, gases, solids, until and unless they sublime, they cannot undergo chemical decomposition. But when they reaches to that temperature, a high temperature, by the process of pyrolysis, then they sufficiently give volatile components. They sufficiently form vapors. Like wood can act as a solid fuel, paper can act as a solid fuel, any plastic material, then dried leaves, textile material, jute, etc. can act as solid fuels. Same as for liquid, like petroleum, fraction, aromatic compounds, benzene, alcohols, non-petroleum fractions, naphtha and all, they can act as combustible substances. These are the flash point for the gasoline and kerosene along with the ignition temperature, and the ignition temperature and flash point for other materials. Then we have fire point. It is the lowest temperature at which the fuel, at that place where we have talked of auto ignition and flash point, we are talking of all the substances, both solids and liquids. But here we are most probably considering with the liquid fuel. When the fuel in an open container gives off vapors which support combustion once ignited. So that is fire point. Then we have a flashover, means a transition phase of fire where the exposed surface of all the combustibles within a compartment, they themselves reach to the auto ignition temperature. Then spawn of plume, that is the smoke which is being produced, the hot gases, the flashes of hot gases along with the flame together, and the smoke, that is called as plume, which is above the fire. Then we have types of fire. They can be natural, means any sort of fire that is occurring by some natural phenomena, some natural process, like the fire in any hailstorm, okay, any forest fire. Then we have accidental fires. Accidental fire includes like the any sort of electrical sparking in the homes, or like bursting or something of any electrical appliance, okay. Then incendiary fires, these are important from the forensic point of view, incendiary fires, because these includes arson. So you get the idea, arson is a type of fire only, but arson is mainly dealing with what? The motive of the person, the intention of the person. So we defined arson as the intentional fires, means deliberately the person has putting the things on fire, that are called as incendiary fires. Then electrical fires, means due to some short circuit or some failure of electrical appliance, like that. Then we have different phases of fire. The first one is the incipient phase, the earliest phase of fire. The length, the area, the fuel load, etc. It will depend upon the initial things, means how the fire has started. Then emergent smoldering phase, means the product of combustion, they become increasingly visible. We can able to see that black soot coming out from that. Then the free burning phase, it is the phase where the fire has reaches to the maximum and it is of very high intensity. Means it is taking all the things present in the room, in the vicinity, to catch fire. Then oxygen regulated smoldering phase is, during this phase, if suppose we cut off the oxygen supply, if we deplete the oxygen supply, then the fire starts reducing. Now moving on to, this was all about fire, the chemistry of fire. When we say arson, so the factors remains the same, the fire triangle remains the same, everything remains the same, but arson is more concerned with the intention of the person, as it originates from the Anglo-French word meaning act of burning. How the burning is being done. Is it some natural thing? Is it some accidental thing? Or is it done by any person with a bad intention to kill someone, with a bad intention to destroy someone's property? Okay, like that. Someone's belonging or other thing. So, in common terms, arson is the act of willful and malicious burning. So we defined arson as an act of malicious burning, an act of deliberate burning. It is considered to be one of the oldest crime known to man. Okay, it can be the crime against person and the crime against property. Like those bright burning cases are nothing but they may involve under arson, and the crime against property means someone has completely like put the house of another person on fire, or any workplace, any building, any area, like that, any garage or something. So in arson, the two things are considered important. The first one is we have to look for the evidence to locate, and which is very difficult to locate. Like if someone has putting intentionally something on fire, so there might be the evidence, like we may find fingerprints, we may find footprints, we may find any sort of accident bottle, any sort of container, any deliberate traps, any sort of booby traps, like any matchstick, any matchbox, any sort of fuse, any electrical trapping is there. Okay, so all these things we have to possibly look for in that burnt remains, and we have to prove criminal intent. But both the things are very difficult to locate and prove. Reasons for arson can be to get financial gain, to get some profit, to conceal another crime, to destroy or to cause vandalism, to take revenge, and sometimes to become a hero or to do any sort of show off and what. And lastly, some persons are pyromaniac, means they are some sort of they may have some sort of disturbance with their psychic, because they used to love putting things on fire. So these are the persons who known as pyromaniac. Then what are the types of evidence we can recover in the arson and fire cases? Specifically in arson, means the fire is the fire. Arson is also a fire, but we have to look out the scene of crime very carefully, very crucially, so that we can judge, we can find out, yes, this is a fire and this is a arson. So we have to look for the evidence properly, cautiously. So in arson case, we first and the foremost evidence to look for is evidence of incendiary origin. Means the fire debris, we have to look out carefully. Okay, we have to look for the burn patterns, we have to look for the fire characteristics, any possible elimination of the accidental causes, means any foreign material or any sort of motive which we can see at the scene, any fraud case, any sort of some complexity between the property or between the person, some things like that. Then we have to take the testimony of the persons, the eyewitness testimony is important to look and to find out whether the person or the arson which is being there or fire which has been taken place, is it arson or not. Then any sort of confession, sorry, and any sort of circumstantial linkage. So all the circumstantial evidence we can see on reaching the scene of fire or arson at the time, then that will affect our opinion, that will definitely affect our perspective, how to analyze, how to proceed with the things. Type of accelerants is another important evidence in these type of cases, like any ignitable fuel is there, unburnt accelerant we can find which is mixed with the debris from the fire. If some sort of like clothing material we can find, then those accelerants traces, they may get trapped in that cloth material. So we have to look out carefully from that burnt remains, because during fire and arson generally everything is getting spoiled. Fire is considered to be its own enemy, because as it proceeded it will uh, keep on taking the objects along with it and make them burnt, make them ash. So we have to look out for any possible evidence we recover from those ashes, from those debris. So everything is getting destroyed. If we reach the scene of crime in these type of cases at time, then only we can able to find out some fruitful evidence. Okay, otherwise we have to search more, we have to do a lot of hard work to find out any sort of possible evidence which help us in recovering, or which help us in finding the cause, the origin of fire. If suppose we reach the scene on time along with the firefighting officers, but the firefighting officers, what they did, they tried to save the person, because the first and the foremost motto is to save the life of the person. So when they try to do that, they simply put water all over the area, and during that process there are chances that our crucial evidence they get destroyed, because these accelerants, if they are used, because in most of the fire cases generally gasoline or the petroleum fractions can be seen in the form of burnt residues or traces which we are recovering from those area. So these traces, they are getting trapped because they are of volatile nature, they are of flammable nature, their vapors are flammable. So they are getting trapped with some of the objects, or they may adhere to some of the places. And when we are not able to reach the place at time, we are not able to search the place properly, collect the evidence properly. Before us, the firefighting officers are there, so they simply put water all over the area, so these traces, these evidence, they are lost. Okay, or we can say like they may be lost, so we cannot able to recover them again. That's why we have to look for the partially burned accelerants, completely burned accelerants, any sort of foreign material, any sort of accelerant bottle, any sort of container, any other thing which help us in finding out and which makes our investigation fruitful. So, arson, when we say, because fire and arson are almost the same, but we only the thing which makes them different is the intention of the person. If we find these points, these evidence at the scene of crime, means that type of scene is arson scene. If suppose we have multiple point of origin, because if a fire has occurred, so in the case of fire we only have a single point of origin, means at one point it gets started and it will spread all over the area. But if we find multiple point of origin, means in a room only, suppose if we find a fire at the starting of the room, then we find the fire in the ending of the room. Or in a house, if I say, if we find fire in the garden area, then we find fire or that thing which is burning inside the bedroom of the person and at the backyard. So we have a multiple point of origin. So a natural fire or normal fire, the fire occurs in a normal scenario, will never occur like this. If suppose something is on fire and it is not being stopped or controlled or being watched properly, then it will spread and it will leads to burn to the entire area. So that spreading, that fire trail patterns, they can be seen easily. Okay, and we can able to find out, yes, these are the patterns, means this is the natural fire because it spreads like this. But if we find undamaged area all over, but at certain places, at certain points we find the damaged one, and that damaged one to be at very places which are at so much of distance, no connection between them, then we might think that yes, it's a case of arson. So we may find multiple point of origin, the presence of the accelerant material, any peculiar smell, peculiar odor of the accelerant bottle, any accelerant material. Suppose we may find the gasoline smell, odor, or any sort of material which can be used as thinner, alcohol, any ester. Okay, then look for the fire trails, deliberate arrangement of the objects, of the loads, means they are arranged in a sequential manner, so that if one is getting burning by the process of conduction, others will also start burning. Tampering with the fire protection system, fire extinguishers, they are being tampered. Unnatural fire pattern like this, one is there and one is at so much of distance without any link, but still the fire is there. No possible cause, like how fire has occurred at that area, but still fire has occurred, means that is a case of arson. Someone has intentionally put it that area on fire or that thing on fire. Finding some time delay devices, any sort of incendiary devices, tampering with the electrical appliances or something. These are the possible causes, or we can say like possible things which may indicate about the arson, possible evidence. Now, moving on to the investigation part, how we investigate the scene. The first and the foremost thing is we have to find out the origin of fire, from where it has begun, cause of fire, and look for the possible evidence. So we have to do preliminary examination of the debris. Okay, that preliminary examination of the debris is, while firstly we have to collect the debris. So we have to do the scene investigation, like we have reached the scene on time, we have provided the emergency aid to the persons who are needy, we have barricade the area. Then we have to do a documentation of the scene, a visual inspection of the entire scene, then note taking, photography, search for the evidence, collection and preserve the evidence. Visual inspection includes our looking for the any unnatural lateral spread of fire, any unnatural things which is not considered to be normal, evidence of any trailers, any sort of accident, unlikely relationship between the point of origin of the body, some sort of heat indicators, delayed ignition devices. Then we have to take the notes, we have to prepare the notes for all the things, exact address, time, condition of the weather, anything, any person present, any sort of odor detected, unusual thing present. We have to simultaneously do photography and sketching of the scene. Then we have to search for the evidence. After doing barricading the scene and providing the first aid, we should prevent the entry exit. Then we start searching from the outside to the inside. Laterally progresses inside, moving from the point of least burning towards the point of maximum damage, so that we can able etc. Any property which can be mislabeled or may cause confusion, means any sort of liquid accelerant, point of origin. If multiple, then it might be arson. Multiple damage at different places, it might be arson. Okay, any sort of incendiary material, that can also be arson. So we have to look out for these possible evidences. Then moving on to the fire patterns. So usually when fire spreads, it will create a triangular shaped, a conical shaped pattern generally. Okay, patterns are formed. These patterns can be formed like because the fire is being spreading. So if during the spread, if it is intersected by the wall, then we can see these type of pattern. Then we have some columnar patterns. We have some sort of patterns of inverted cones, wide U-shaped pattern onto the ceilings, onto the walls in combination with the ceiling. Like this, we have an inverted cone pattern caused by the ignitable liquids burning on the floor. This type of pattern can be seen. Then like this, we have a columnar pattern produced by the fire, developed more than the fires that produce triangular pattern, means the intersection of a wall with the column. If suppose fire is here, then it is during the spread, it is getting intersected with the wall. So this column shaped pattern can be seen. This is called the circular pattern onto the ceiling along with the wall, U-shaped pattern on the wall. A pool shaped pattern, or we can say like irregular or curved shaped pattern, anything which any term which we can use to describe these type of patterns. Intersection of the cone with the wall. because fire is progressing, and during the progressive stage, it is getting intersected by any sort of wall or ceiling. Okay, we have like V-shaped pattern also. This cone can be described as V-shaped if the base of the plume is showing a close intersection with the wall. Here you can see this is also a pattern, but this is closely intersecting with the wall like this. And here this base is intersecting with the wall. At that place, this portion is intersecting. Here this base is intersecting. Then we have like circular patterns also, like onto the ceiling we can see some sort of smoke deposition in the form of partial circles. Okay, then suppose some accelerant is being used, or something is being flown onto the floor, then we can see these type of patterns. Similarly, if suppose any wooden furniture is there, then if we see the underside burning, means the fire direction is toward upwards. Means from here the fire has started and it is moving in upward direction. That's why this underside charring and underside burning is there. But if the fire direction is downwards, then the underside is remaining like this because the fire has proceeded from top to bottom. So we can see this top portion is more charred, more black, more burnt. Another kind of pattern is like heat horizons, smoke horizons onto the wall. Means entire walls, they are getting black. Then these are the smoke colors. If suppose the combustible material is cloth and paper, so the color of the flame is yellow to red and the smoke is gray to brown. If suppose any acetone or organic solvent is there, then blue and black. Kerosene is used, then color of the flame is yellow and the smoke is black. Any gasoline is used, then yellow to white is the flame and black is the smoke. Similarly, if we have any plastic material, then the smoke color is black. Rubber material, again the smoke color is black. Color of the flame is yellow and smoky. Wooden, paper, cloth, then we have gray to brown color of the smoke and yellow to red color of the flame. Then we have different organic solvents, volatile solvents are there, and which will give different color of the smoke along with different color of flame. These are the common fire gases. Suppose any wood, paper or some cloth material is being burned, so carbon monoxide, dioxide, formic acid, alcohol, acetic acid, they can be produced. Plastic is burnt, again the same, along with carbon monoxide and dioxide, some nitrogenous oxides, ammonia, it can be produced. If suppose petroleum product is burned, then carbon monoxide, dioxide and acetylene. Similarly, some rubber material is burned, then hydrogen sulfide is there, like this. Then this was about the scene of fire generally at the building or so. If suppose we have different scenario, two more scenarios. One is electrical fire. If suppose someone has caused some tampering with some electrical appliances or some change in the wires or something. Okay, then how we can check for that? If suppose electrical fire generally occurs due to overheating. When we say the fire is of electrical nature, means the wires which are there in that electric circuit, they have reaches to their that tension, that point, like they cannot resist the heat further. So they get overheated and they start melting. Because of that, short circuit occurs and electrical fire takes place. So when they start melting, they get overheated. So if we observe such wires under microscope, we can see this type of shape. This is called mapping or arc mapping. These type of globule formation is there, arcing activity. So if the person is if we see a type of fire and it is not pointing correctly towards the electrical fire, the origin of electrical fire, but the person is saying, no, yes, it is the electrical fire only, that the wires are getting heated up and suddenly short circuit occurs and so and so, and the fire has taken place. So we can check these things. These parameters we can check in those burnt wires, in those tempered wires. If we find this, means he's saying the truth, the person is telling the truth, not a lie. Like this arc formation is there, means the wires are getting overheated, means the fire is a natural thing. Then we have another scenario of motor vehicle fires. So in the motor vehicle fires, we have these two compartments. We have a passenger section and we have a engine compartment, engine and passenger. So if suppose fire is in the engine compartment, that can be considered as a natural fire by some default in the machinery. But if the fire in the passenger section, that gives some doubt of suspicion that yes, it is being intentionally done by someone. So motor vehicle fires, we have fuel leakage, then vehicle fire take place, then some faulty electrical system is there on the vehicle, so that may lead to this windshield. It is being consumed and melted at its base. From the base, it is being consumed. Okay, with the glass intact at the top. If suppose like this, in this, it is consumed from the bottom but intact at the top. That means indicating the fire spread from the engine compartment, means some sort of faulty brake system, faulty engine system is there. So the fire has started in the engine compartment. But if suppose from the interior vehicle, fire has started from the vehicle inside, from the interior point of view, from the interior side. So the windshield will consumed at its top and lay down intact or exact at the bottom. So that may indicate the fire is from the passenger section. So might be that passenger section fire is intentional because someone wants to kill the passenger sitting in the vehicle. So we have the evidence we can look for is evidence for incendiary origin. Okay, in overall fire cases, not in the motor vehicle electrical fire, in the overall fire and arson cases, we have to look for the residue. We have to observe the span of fire, the color of the smoke, the odor, direction, flame, search for the fire pattern, any U-shape, V-shape pattern, columnar pattern, cone pattern, then charring onto the objects. We have to look for, identify whether the fire extinguisher is used or not, any sort of plant trails. Then we should look for the footprints, fingerprints, any other impression evidence, any other thing that may use witness statement take. Then the evidence must be collected in these airtight containers, unbreakable, leak-proof containers. Okay, not in the paper container and not in the plastic, because that will catches moisture and the entire evidence is getting tempered and destroyed. So absorbent material like wood, paper, fabric, it should be which is present at the scene, it should be collected from the scene because they may retain the traces of the accelerant which might be used at the scene of fire. Items like floorings, rugs, pillows, cushions, any rubbish, any clothing, they should also be properly labeled, properly sampled in the airtight containers. So these airtight containers are of quite larger in size so that we can put the items. But we have to keep all items separate, okay, and properly label them, properly seal them, properly label them. Large items, if suppose which are not which cannot be moved, which are immovable, then we can sample them by cutting small pieces enough to fit into containers. Any other ignition source, if we find, we have to look for any switch, any foreign material like that. Packaging and labeling may include these details, all the details of the IO. Precautions like we should always wear the gloves, helmet, safety glasses, because we are not aware that during the burning might be some chemical may be used that will give off toxic flames, toxic fumes. So we should always wear helmet, gloves, safety glasses, face masks to avoid any sort of contamination to us and also to protect us. Then collect all the evidence very cautiously. Leak-proof containers should be used. Paper bag, polythene bag should be avoided, and always collect the control samples from the unburnt area, uncontaminated area. Now moving on to the forensic examination. The first thing we can do is extraction and isolation. All those debris which we have collected, then from such debris, from such residue, we should apply the technique so that we can able to isolate and we can able to extract those vapors, those traces. Then we perform certain tests for the detection and then confirmation. So these are the different methods which we can use. We can use direct headspace technique for the extraction. like the debris which we have collected in suppose airtight containers, or like in the fullerene sheet, or any sort of like iron trap analyzer or something. So with the help of a syringe, we directly take out the vapor samples. Okay, then we inject it into the headspace, gas chromatography headspace instrument, so that it will directly analyze it. Then next we have this static headspace. These like headspace is this. We have a ampule, or we have a bottle like this. This contains our analyte, means our sample. Sample analyte is this. We have filled that container up to this. We leave this thing, this space, and we seal it, so that this sample is containing the traces, the vapors of these flammable residue, ignitable liquids, ILR, ignitable liquid residue. So these liquid residue, these vapors, they starts forming here, they come here. So we leave this space. This is the head and this is the space. So we called it as head space. So what we can do is we simply make a punch here. Okay, by the help of a puncher, we inject the syringe here, we take out those vapors, and we directly do the instrumental analysis for our ease. So this is direct headspace method. What we are doing is we collect the debris. This is the headspace. We seal it. We heat it. Okay, when we heat it, these substance, these sample, they contains vapors. Okay, so these vapors, they came out, means the debris, it will start forming vapors on heating. These vapors are there, the vapors are formed, and we collect those vapors. Second is static headspace, where we have this fire debris which we have collected. We put a charcoal strip here, charcoal coated strip, we hang it here. Okay, we heat the sample. What happens is, on heating, the vapors are there, vapors are getting trapped, or vapors are getting absorbed onto this charcoal strip. Then we took out this strip. Okay, then we put some solvent into it. So those traces of the ignitable liquid residue, they came into that solution. We took the solution and we do the analysis further. Third one is dynamic headspace. Here also we have the sample. We put two tubes. One is providing the vacuum. Okay, two charcoal tubes are there. We adjust the thing. We provide a vacuum here in the dynamic. Okay, means we continuously swept the air. Okay, and we have these two charcoal strips. So the volatile compounds, the vapors which are being formed on heating, they gets absorbed onto the activated charcoal, these strips. Okay, and then we took out these tubes and start doing the analysis. Then next we can do steam distillation. We put the, usually this thing is not being used now because of these headspace techniques, but earlier we used to perform the analysis like this. We first do steam distillation. We put our sample, we put the water, we allow it to distill. Okay, so that we can get the volatile residue in the pure form. Then we have this SPME, solid phase microextraction technique. We have a polypropylene syringe here. This needle is made up of some polypropylene polymer based substance material. We directly took this needle, that is solid phase microextraction. We took this, we inject this needle here after heating up, so that the vapors, they are getting absorbed onto this surface, and we directly inject it into the headspace. So we can do the confirmatory analysis directly using gas chromatography. The vapors injected into the gas chromatograph. Okay, the analyte is injected into the heated port. It's to be vaporized, and the vapors are injected into GC, which is carried through a column by an inert gas like helium, nitrogen, argon. The column consists of a liquid phase, means the immobilized phase immobilized on the surface of an inert solid. So we are using gas liquid chromatography, where a liquid phase is immobilized on a surface of a solid. Okay, so this chromatography is being performed. This is like the flowchart for the chromatography. We have an oven here. We put, this is the injector port. We put our sample in the injection. Okay, we take that in injection form. We put it here in the sample tray. We put our vials containing the sample. We take it, we inject it here. We have an oven here. That sample is being heated, started heating up. Okay, in this capillary column, the sample is moving like this along with the flow controller of the gas. The carrier gas is there. The carrier gas help that sample analyte to move, to separate out, and to reach to the detector. Okay, so the components, they are getting separated like this on reaching to the detector. The data is processed. with some recorder and the software, and we get the result in the form of these chromatograms. So the GC analyze the vapors which are getting separated, okay, the volatile residue, what that debris is containing, the volatile residue, what it contains. So we have different conditions, okay, like we can use the column of this material detector can be FID, nitrogen gas, we can regulate the flow rate, injector temperature, detector temperature, all these things we can program. So the programmed analysis can be done with mass spectrometry, where we firstly separate out that debris, okay, what that debris contain using GC, using gas chromatograph. Like this is the unknown sample, we don't know what exactly it contains, so this is unknown. Now after doing GC, we came to know that this unknown is containing certain impurities along with the gasoline, because we are putting the standard accelerant, gasoline, kerosene, diesel also. So like this, then of applying MS to it, it will confirm that yes, by mass by charge ratio of the ions, that yes, this is gasoline. The chemical structure is being properly studied, okay, and we can now give the conclusive report that yes, the sample contains gasoline as the accelerant. Means if suppose this thing is there, that proves that this is a case of arson, because any external accelerant is used. Otherwise, it is not a case of arson. It is a general fire. Then we can additionally we can use thin layer chromatography technique also. We can took the fire debris, we put it in the ether for some time. We took the ether extract, we spotted onto the plate, and we developed the plate using these solvents, mobile phases, and then we observe the plate with the help of chloranil spray reagent. So if the spots are coming at the same place of the standard as well as our sample, at the same spot, same place, at the same distance, the distance matches with each other, means this the sample is matching with the standard. So we can do analysis like this by different techniques, by TLC, by HPLC, by gas chromatography, by GCFID, by FGIR also, like this. So we can do the analysis by different techniques, but most popular technique I would say is gas chromatography coupled with headspace. So we do headspace so that we can easily able to do the things in one go. Like we need not to do the things repeatedly again and again. Like first we are doing this, we are not getting the result. Not like that. So we simply take that volatile substance and we inject it in the gas chromatograph.
Okay, right. Yeah, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. Before we just end the session, we will move to the question and answer session. We have some questions in the chat box. If you could address them for us. So someone is asking. Oh, it's quite a lot of them. Could you check the chat box?
Yeah, sure. I'm doing that.
Okay, all right.
Yes, Joanne has asking, does the time lapse between the moment of the incident and the recovery of the accident matter for the purpose of analysis? Yes, it definitely matter, because when actual time of incident, we have that residue, or like we have that accelerant which is being used in the liquid form properly. So we can able to exactly or confirmly say that yes, at the time of incident, if we are at the scene, we can identify it and we say yes, this is a case of arson. But if there is a time gap on recovering the accident matter, because after a time gap when we reach to the scene, everything has been burnt off, so we have to find out the traces of such residue or that accelerant, that fuel traces we have to look for in that burnt remains. So that will definitely affect our analysis. Not we cannot say that any particular component has a greater influence or impact on the contribution of fire, because all the three components have their importance equally. If suppose we cut off the oxygen supply, then the fire will stop. If we are not providing enough fuel, then the fire will not continue. Okay, and if suppose the heat source is not there, then the fire will not start. So all the three components have their own importance. We cannot consider that this is more important and this is less important. Yeah, the fire emergency service, especially the extinguishing fire using water, it will hamper the evidence, the quality of evidence, I would say, because at that time everything is having water over here. So these accelerants, the fuels which I'm talking of, those gasoline or those petroleum fractions, they have the tendency that they get trapped in some of the objects. They get trapped in the form of traces. We cannot able to look out, or we cannot able to see clearly with our naked eyes, but they have the property that they get trapped. So on coming contact with water, we cannot later on, we it is very difficult for us to analyze them, because we have to apply the technique which can be best suited one to get those traces. How long? That would be difficult. Like, I have never heard such type of case where I can say that yes, up to about this much duration the fire has occurred. Might be this can be considered as a topic of research area, as a topic of we can do some innovative studies by doing some practical based exercise in this. Because as long as the fuel is there, the fire will continue, the fire will sustain. But as long as any of the three component is not there, the fire will stop automatically. Hope I have answered all the queries of the chat box.
Yeah, I think we've answered everything. And Joanna has also asked the question I also wanted to ask regarding the fire emergency service and the water. And then you've answered that question as well. So please, if anyone in the chat, in this audience has any question, you can put it in the chat box, or you can just raise up your hands and ask directly. Please, any more questions from the audience? You can put it into the chat box, or you just raise up your hands and then we would call you to ask your query. Dr. Vital, any question from you?
No, not yet, please.
Okay, all right. Then I believe we would end the session from here. Yeah, thank you so much for the wonderful presentation this session. I got enlightened. I learned a lot of new stuff, and then I got reminded of things that I forgot to. Thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I believe all our audience have benefited from one or two from this your wonderful presentation. Thank you so much for your time, and we really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to having you in subsequent sessions to discuss other things into details. Thank you so much. God bless you. And our audience, thank you so much for bearing with us and staying with us from the very beginning till end, even though we had some challenges. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me as a guest lecturer. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Have a great day all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you too. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.